If I were to ask you to name the original World War II games, the ones that became bestsellers, kicked off franchises, and were mainstays in gaming for years, what would you come up with? Maybe Battlefield 1942, the original Call of Duty, Medal of Honor Allied Assault, and even games like Brothers in Arms or Day of Defeat. In the early 2000s, some of the most popular games were World War II themed shooters, but despite being both a World War II history nerd and an MMO nerd myself, I somehow completely missed out on a game called World War II Online. Now, World War II Online came out on June 6, 2001, so yeah, that's over 20 years ago. But through sheer love of the project, the community has somehow managed to keep it alive long enough that the devs are now actually porting it over to Unreal Engine 5. Yes, this is a free game that was first developed before the original Unreal Engine 1 was even created, and it's now being made in UE5. I don't even know how I found this game, to be honest. I was in some weird black hole of the internet and I stumbled upon it, but over the past week, I've kind of dove headfirst into it. I've played way too much, and I've got to say, it's pretty interesting. So let me break the game down for y'all, explain how it works, some of the things I like, some of the things I dislike, and maybe if y'all like it too, we can get a little bit of a resurgence in players for one of the more unique, forgotten games of the early 2000s. World War II Online itself has campaigns, and both the Allied and Axis powers fight in a 24/7 persistent battle across the map until one side wins. In order to win, you need to capture and secure enemy territory until you eventually secure the enemy's factory towns, removing their ability to resupply and therefore ending the war. The current campaign, which started last week, is number 196, and to give you some perspective, the last two campaigns took over 70 days to finish. This is definitely a longer and slower paced game than even Foxhole, where long wars are ones that are 30 to 40 days, so World War II Online is a slugfest. But despite the very rough visuals, I've discovered that this game has an incredible amount of depth in terms of the large-scale strategy of the war and the tactical fights over towns. Each faction has a volunteer core of users called the High Command, which are veterans who volunteer and work with the devs to more or less play chess between each other by moving brigades around the map in order to stage offensives as well as defend against attacks. Although every town might have some basic infantry supplies like rifles or trucks, you won't actually get any tanks, for example, unless your armored division gets deployed there. And if you lose too many vehicles, your factories behind the scenes will start to slowly work and replace what was lost. Unlike a game like Foxhole, where players literally have to grind each and every day to not only make, but also deliver supplies and material to the front, World War II Online has a system where the game will automatically calculate what is missing from your base, and the more factories you have, the quicker you're replenished. Infantry supplies can come back fairly quickly, but if you start losing too many tanks, it could be hours until they're replaced. It's a really unique system, and I think it's a lot more user-friendly than Foxhole, but it still gives you opportunities to do things like bomber raids deep behind enemy lines in order to bomb factory towns, putting them out of commission and slowing down logistics, and potentially losing that frontline battle due to simple attrition. So that's the idea of it, but how does this actually play out? Well, when you start the game, you're required to go through basic training. And when I say basic training, I mean it. It's incredibly basic, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's almost unchanged from 20 years ago, since a lot of the mechanics are simply requiring you to move around and fire your weapon. As you can see, the game, it's all right, it's old, right? Like, listen, you're watching this right now, and a second ago when I was talking about the strategy and things like that, you were probably thinking, wow, these mechanics are really cool and it's really in depth. And now you're probably thinking, Moi, why in the hell are you playing this game? And you know what? I was thinking that exact same thing right about now. The entire in-game infantry experience is incredibly basic. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And although it was nice to have required training, it didn't really get me that excited for the real game, if I'm being brutally honest. But once you are done with training, the entire game unlocks and you can join the live campaign. Here you can choose Allied or Axis, and you can even swap between the two every 15 minutes. And under each nation, you can also choose to pick the Army, Air Force, or Navy. Now, this game also goes through actual time progression, since it is a 24/7 persistent war replicating the timeline of World War II. every 9 real-world days, the game automatically upgrades your tech tiers, starting with Tier 0 in 1940 with France as one of the large playable nations, but eventually moving to Tier 3 and unlocking the Americans while France is reduced to essentially one small division. Early war has very basic weaponry and equipment, while late war will obviously have your more powerful vehicles. In each of these personas, as they're called, you can do different things. Army allows you to deploy as not only infantry, but also tanks, field guns, various forms of light armor, and transport vehicles. You can fly planes in the Air Force, and there's actual ships and boats in the Navy. You also have certain ranks depending on your specific persona. So if you've reached level 3 Army in France, you have the SMG unlocked, but if you swap to British, you're going to need to level your Army persona again since they're all unique. It's kind of a neat way to reward players sticking to a side and giving a pretty good feeling of progression throughout the war. After you pick your persona, you then select your brigade, which has a home at the various towns across the map, and from there you join an attack or defend mission and just begin fighting. Once again, I love the idea of the game. I think the map is awesome. I think the large-scale persistent war is awesome. I just love the idea of what feels like a meaningful and never-ending game of Battlefield 1942. But as I said before, the graphics and infantry movement are rough, like really rough. And I know BattleBit has proven that you don't need good graphics to be a good game, but the blocky textures in BattleBit are very obviously a stylistic choice to look like Minecraft or Roblox. World War II Online just looks like old, like really old. And the infantry kind of just plays old too. A lot of the mechanics and keybinds feel a little clunky, there's no free look, but I do actually think the weapon firing mechanics are fine. They handle like you think they'd handle, but there's weird running animations from players and your character just kind of feels like you're slip sliding around the entire map. All of that stuff really just pulls me out, but I'm once again brought back into the game and the idea of the game because of the depth needed to secure objectives. I happened upon this battle here where the Allies were assaulting this port town, and not only was there infantry and tanks, but literally dozens of planes in the air. I was helping fortify our position while tanks were exploding and dive bombers were being blown out of the sky, and as we managed to slowly grind through the town and secure it, we realized that we had no supply to hold in case of a counterattack. So instead of just going through the meat grinder, I actually backed out to the brigade menu, created a resupply mission, loaded up a hauler, and made the 20-minute drive to the town to drop off supplies and create a forward spawn. But I know some of y'all don't care about that at all. So if you don't care about the macro view of the game and instead you just want to get into firefights, I've got to say World War II Online, despite the visuals, have given me some of the most adrenaline-fueled air battles I've ever experienced. Everything in the game is realistic, bordering flight simulators, and I've had to spend about a half an hour learning all the buttons to properly take off and land a simple fighter. Even though it's a 20-year-old game, they actually recommend you use a joystick. And although I did manage to get my bearings with a mouse and keyboard, a joystick definitely seems like it would be so much easier. I did fly a few solo missions, flying some air support for ground troops, but the game really hits its stride when you have a wingman. And although I did manage to shoot down a plane myself, some of the best moments were the communication between your teammates, calling out enemy planes and working in tandem to take them out. It does get you pretty hyped up, and it kind of resembles DCS multiplayer games if I'm being honest, even though it obviously doesn't look that way. And although I haven't played around with them much myself, the tanks have realistic armor and penetration mechanics as well, so this persistent world will give you tank fights that are similar to things like War Thunder sim battles. But what's cool is that if you're a solo player, you can actually run the entire tank yourself. You can get it going, turning on the engine, get it into gear, and point the tank in a direction, swap over to the gunner, and then scan for targets while it continues moving. It's really cool, and they do also have a system called multi-crew where you can join a player's vehicle, and that way you are actually much more effective in battle since you have 2 or more people using it. Here, as you can see, I actually joined a destroyer. Yeah, this game has actual naval warfare, and I was able to jump around to the large naval guns, AA weapons, and even torpedo tubes while the captain steered the ship. And you can even get large landing ships, load material on them, stage amphibious landings, and I'm just blown away at the depth of this game. I really wish it had more players, since even the smaller skirmishes I've seen have been really fun and immersive, but I see how intense it could be with hundreds and hundreds of people on each side. But now that I've said how amazing this game is, there's got to be a downside, right? Okay, yeah, of course there's going to be downsides. And as much fun as I've had with air battles and the large scale strategy and just thinking over these things, I do think the infantry combat is extremely lacking. But that may also be because the player base itself is so low. I did have some fun holding my own in a bunker and being the last holdout while the entire town around me fell, but the combat does have a good amount of jank. Also, if you were to go on Steam right now, you would see that World War II Online has just 30 to 40 players max, but that actually isn't the true player count since most of the player base has actually downloaded and uses the standalone client. One thing that does bug me quite a bit is that if you've ever created a web account, you actually can't use it to log in on the Steam account. Like, it doesn't even give me an option to try and log in with my name and password, and instead keeps asking me to create a brand new account. If you're a new player, this doesn't really matter, and honestly I just recommend if you do want to check the game out, just download it for free on Steam, pick the Steam account, don't go to the website, and once you've actually logged in on Steam, you'll get a bunch of free stuff. I think they're giving away like 90 days of the premium account, so just do it that way. But now that we brought that up, there's no other way around it, so let's just rip the band-aid off. The subscription model is very aggressive. I think aggressive is probably the best way to put it. Although certain weapons and vehicles are locked behind ranks, a lot of them are further locked behind the premium subscription. And although they do have events and weekends that unlocks everything for players every once in a while, it does feel like asking $18 a month might be a little too much so I can just use a Thompson or be a combat engineer. Combat engineers, for example, are the only ones that can build and fortify and can make or break a front. So if you don't have any premium players nearby, you could really just be out of luck. Now, I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend to know if $18 is the right price point needed with the current player base in order for the devs to pay for the servers and continue development and all that. And I'm guessing that after 20 years, this game is probably living off some very generous users who just simply love the project. But I feel that if this was just a bit more active of a game, a subscription to it, since it is an actual open world 24/7 persistent war FPS, is not necessarily out of the question. I do think right now it is kind of steep, and it does get a bit aggressive though with every death reminding you to purchase that subscription when you go to choose your kit or vehicle, and then once again being reminded again that you don't have access to something because it's premium only. Like, I get it. I get at this point they need to make money. The game's 20 years old, and I understand. Part of me wants to just subscribe because I love the idea and I get romantic about MMO persistent war games, but I do know the average person, especially if you've never played this before, $18 is kind of expensive. That's a premium amount. I mean, a World of Warcraft subscription is $15 a month. And Foxhole, which is also a 24/7 persistent war game, is just the price of the game itself without any monthly subscription at all. Anyways, if y'all are interested, I'm more than happy trying to join a few more of these larger events, recording them, and letting y'all know how they end up, since honestly, World War II Online seems like a pretty cool idea if the player base is still there. Now, for the most part, it does seem like midday to evening US or European time, there's actually plenty of stuff to do and plenty of people online. You can literally just spawn in, grab a plane, and go somewhere where there's fighting, and you can find yourself in some crazy awesome dogfights. It's a lot of fun and nerve-wracking when you're just flying up in the cloud cover and all of a sudden out of nowhere a Hurricane, Spitfire, EF-109, whatever just blows past you. That type of stuff I'm actually loving so much, and every day this past week I've logged on and just tried to get into some random fights. So if you are also interested in maybe just playing some World War II Online with me or maybe other people in the community, feel free to join my Discord at discord.gg/MoiDawg, since I've been having a blast getting groups together to go do some air raids. But let me know your thoughts on World War II Online in the comments. Do you think it's really just a dead game? Have you played it before? Maybe you want to drop in and see if we can get a little bit of a revival going? Let me know, and if you like the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. But that's it for me. Until next time, peace.